What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Osmo Fantasy Football YouTube channel. And we are continuing our rankings reveals. We did quarterbacks yesterday. And today we are going through the first part of our top 24 wide receivers. Of course, it is myself along with Nick Lepri. You can follow him on Twitter at Notorious Fantasy. I am on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. And we did quarterbacks, but this is the heart of fantasy football here. Wide receivers. Today, we'll be doing the first 12. We'll be doing the second 12 in our second part to this video. But Nick, I'm excited, man. How are you feeling about our rankings reveal for the wide receiver position?
Yeah, we had such a fun time yesterday doing quarterbacks. I'm sure we're going to have even more of a fun time here with a very open position at wide receiver. Things early on are very chalk, but later on, it's going to get very open. It's going to be a very fun discussion. So I'm excited to be here, and I hope you guys do end up enjoying today's video.
Yeah, this is a position much different than quarterback. We can relatively project all the quarterbacks and their volume, but receivers where you really see players fall off, you see players break out. We have rookies that are going to come in and play right away, and it makes it a really interesting position to evaluate. And for today's video, we're going to start at the top. I think there's a little less debate up there, and with Cooper Kupp, he'll be number one for you, for me, and I'm sure for most other people in the industry. But once you get past him is where the debate really starts. Before we get started, I want to tell you guys about our sponsor. It is Underdog Fantasy. And if you haven't heard of Underdog Fantasy, they have all sorts of contests available to you guys. They have live drafts, pick'em contests, and they have Best Ball. And they just unveiled Best Ball Mania 2. This is a massive, massive tournament with millions of dollars in prizes. It is just $25 to enter. So make sure to check that out. And we also have a promo code available to you guys to get some extra money. If you use the promo code AWESOMO, you are going to get a match deposit bonus up to $100. That's a fantastic value, so make sure to check that out. Again, this is a grand prize of $1 million to first place, just $25 to enter for Best Ball Mania. But let's get into this. We teased it. The number one receiver on both of our boards is Cooper Kupp. Honestly, this is probably the position we'll debate the least. This is a pass-first offense. It's a fantastic quarterback situation with Stafford now in his second year. The continuity is there with Kupp. Kupp was first in targets. He had a 32% target share, 32.5% air yard share. He was first in the NFL in yards per route run, a predictive metric provided by Pro Football Focus. I mean, what's not to like about this guy?
Yeah, there is literally nothing not to like. He was the number one receiver last year easily. He was the Triple Crown winner, most receptions, most receiving yards, most touchdowns, and he even had the most targets last year at the wide receiver position. Sure, maybe he does fall off slightly, right? I highly doubt he's going to put up the crazy numbers he put up last year. But when you're talking about safety at the wide receiver position, I understand you're not necessarily drafting for safety, but Cooper Kupp is the definition of safety. You just throw him in your lineup. He's going to be great. And obviously, everyone knows how good he was last year. Everyone watched, everyone saw just how dominant he was, especially in the Super Bowl. The guy absolutely dominated this year in 2022. They got Allen Robinson. That's going to do nothing for Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp's going to have yet another great season.
Yeah, we talked about this with the quarterback video, but there are targets leaving in Odell Beckham, but there's also targets coming in. So it's not like teams can dedicate their coverage entirely to Kupp. Kind of like what we saw last year. The Rams will move him around. They'll find advantageous ways to get him the ball. And he's actually pretty good with the ball in his hands after the catch as well. So no surprise here with Cooper Kupp. Not too much debate at the top. And I imagine this will be the consensus around the industry. So let's move to wide receiver 2. And this is where the debate kind of starts for us. And we're doing consensus rankings. So you can tell me if you differ from this at all. Our consensus has Justin Jefferson, Vikings receiver, number 2. There's a lot to like about him as well. He might not be in quite as much of a pass-first offense with Kirk Cousins under center. We know they like to establish the run. They have a new offensive personnel grouping involved in the coaching staff coming in, new coach overall. They have a new GM. So we don't know what the offense will look like entirely yet. I was actually a little surprised they brought back Kirk Cousins in the band for another year, but we'll see how that works. With Jefferson, he was 4th in targets last year. He had 167. That's a 29% target share. And we know this guy is an elite downfield threat. He had a 46% air yard share, 5th in the NFL in yards per route run. What do you think this new offense looks like, and how do you think Jefferson fits in?
Yeah, Justin Jefferson to me is just locked and loaded as a top 5 wide receiver this season. I believe that last year was maybe just only the beginning of what we could see him potentially turn into. He was the wide receiver 4 last year in half PPR and the wide receiver number 4 in half PPR points per game. He was top 5 in targets, receptions, receiving yards. The only metric in which he was not top 5 in was touchdowns. He scored 10 touchdowns. We do know that Adam Thielen is just a monster when it comes to scoring touchdowns. So maybe if Adam Thielen plays the whole season, he vultures some away from Justin Jefferson, but that's not something you actually want to worry about at the end of the day. Kirk Cousins, while everyone has a strong opinion on him saying that this guy is terrible, blah, 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 I actually think Kirk Cousins is a little bit better than that. I'm not saying he's Pat Mahomes or something, but he's not as bad as people give him. The opinion on him, I think, is just a little bit wrong. But at the end of the day, I think that this is going to be a solid offense yet again. The offensive scheme may be a little bit different, but, the best player on the team is Justin Jefferson. So they're going to get him the ball.
Yeah, you definitely think they'd prioritize that. And I mean, speaking of Kirk Cousins, he completed over 66% of his passes, 7.5 yards per attempt, 8.1 when you adjust that. So, I mean, he's serviceable. He's not going to ever really approach that Patrick Mahomes territory, but he can get Justin Jefferson the ball. And I think that's what's most
Yeah.
important. Overall, I'm just excited to see how the new offense looks. And I'm hoping they open it up a little bit more with Cousins and Jefferson. And with Thielen, he is there, but I don't think there's too much worry. The guy is well into his 30s at this point in his career. We saw the injuries take form a little bit last year. So Jefferson, he's locked in for me. If you ranked him a little lower, anywhere in the top 5 is fine, but I'm very, very comfortable here in the top 2. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that all of these wide receivers we have in the top 5, I think are the consensus top 5 guys. And if you just jumble them around a little bit, that's okay. But I do think everyone should have Cup number 1.
This is where, so you and I both have Jefferson too. I think when we move
Yes.
away from this, we'll start to see our rankings differ a little bit. In our consensus, Jamar Chase pops up as number 3. And I think there are reasons you might rank him lower. It is not the past friendliest offense. Jamar Chase was 19th in targets last year. He was a rookie, so we did see that number ascend throughout the year. I think we can reasonably predict he will receive more targets than he did last year, assuming health. He finished with a 24% target share, 37% of the air yards. We know he's going to be used downfield a lot like Justin Jefferson. He was 6th in the NFL in yards per route run as a rookie, which is just downright crazy. 2.44 yards per route, unbelievable efficiency metrics there. The Bengals actually lost a decent amount of targets. They lost 72 from their offense. And they're a team that did pass a decent amount of neutral game script. They were 9th in neutral pass rate. Schedule will be tougher this year. They played a dead last schedule last year. They'll be playing a first place schedule this year. So hopefully they're in a little more shootouts. But what do you think of Chase?
Yeah, Chase is a guy that is almost suffering from the Bengals' success because they have Jamar Chase, they have T. Higgins, they have Tyler Boyd. And while to me he is the number 1 guy on the team, you can also make the argument that maybe T. Higgins is going to continue to ascend and play a little bit better. And maybe T. Higgins is the guy that ends up finishing inside the top 5. Would I rank T. Higgins there? No. I have Jamar Chase currently ranked inside the top 5 as well. I like Jamar Chase a ton. But unlike Cooper Kupp, unlike Justin Jefferson, there is real competition here for Jamar Chase's targets. And there are going to be games where Jamar Chase, maybe he gets locked down, he falls out of favor, and T. Higgins has the huge game. So, again, this isn't trying to be negative about Jamar Chase. This is more of nitpicking when you're inside the top 5. Jamar Chase was fantastic last season. His receiving touchdowns is what really helped him out a ton. He was top 5 in touchdowns with 13. He was also top 5 in yards. So realistically, if he does get more targets, he only had 7.5 per game, then his numbers should increase. He's a great player. I like Jamar Chase, and I do like this offense. Again, we are just kind of nitpicking a little here.
Yeah, I saw in your rankings you had him as the wide receiver 4. I had him as the wide receiver 3. So it is literally nitpicking at this point. But just from a prospect profile, it doesn't get much better than Chase. He has elite size adjusted speed. And we actually saw that down the stretch last year. He wasn't just winning downfield, but he did take a couple screens on some very long plays in the playoffs as well, which was positive to see for Chase. He's winning all over the field. Let's move to our wide receiver 4. You had this player a little higher than me in rankings. It's Davante Adams. He's getting up there in age, approaching his age 30 season, but he moves over to Las Vegas with the enormous contract extension they signed him to, and it should be a positive for the offense as a whole that was previously using some combination of Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow as the wide receiver 1. There is a new coaching staff here with Josh McDaniels, and that's my worry. I'll talk about that a little bit after you speak to Adams and why you view him as a top 3 receiver.
Yeah, so the reason why I like Davante Adams is mostly because of how skilled Davante Adams is at Green Bay. Obviously, one of the biggest reasons why he succeeded was because of Aaron Rodgers, but it's not like Aaron Rodgers just hoisted him, right? Any quarterback that was smart enough to throw this guy the ball at the same high rate that Aaron Rodgers did would have been very successful. Davante Adams is dominant inside of the red zone. Now he does have a lot more competition, though. Last year he's dealing with Alan Lazard, MVS around him, right? These guys that don't really matter at all. Now he's got Hunter Renfrow. He has Darren Waller. There are legitimate targets around him that are a little bit worrisome for Davante Adams. But again, Davante Adams is the number one guy on the team. They traded this huge haul for him. They pay him the big bucks. I believe Davante Adams will be a top 5 wide receiver. I have him ranked at wide receiver 3. Again, this is kind of not the best situation, but I do also think, like Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr is also pretty underrated.
Yeah, I do think Derek Carr is a little bit of an underrated quarterback. I think it's a downgrade from Adams moving to Rodgers to Carr. So that is a bit of a concern for me. The age is a concern for me. The volume is a little bit of a concern. I just don't think he's second in the NFL in targets like he was last year with the competition around him. And then you have Josh McDaniels, a coach who's been a little bit run heavy, at least of late. That even occurred when Tom Brady was under center in New England. So that's a concern for me as well. Does this Raiders team just embrace the run? And we saw them take a back in the NFL draft. So that is a little bit of a concern for me. But again, we're nitpicking here. I had Adams as wide receiver 5. You had him as wide receiver 3. You and I are both very comfortable with him in the top 5. Anything else to add with Adams here before we move on?
Yeah, to be honest, no, not really. I just think that Davante Adams is going to continue to succeed. I mean, I just think that the skill is going to outweigh the situation, and you could be right about them trying to run the ball a little bit more. Maybe that's a worry this year. I don't think that'll be a worry going forward because they didn't even give Josh Jacobs his 5th-year option.
I mean, one last thing. This Raiders team has 130 vacated targets from the wide receiver position. They have 175 vacated targets overall. So there is available opportunity. 175 targets from that offense are gone, and Renfrow and Waller are still there. So I think Adams can slide in and receive a lot of targets right away. My only concern was that it's just not quite as much as Green Bay. But let's move to wide receiver 5. I actually had Stefon Diggs a little higher than you. I had him as wide receiver 4. He's a little bit further down your board. So I'll kind of lay out the bull case for Stefon Diggs, and then I want to hear your rebuttal. With Diggs, he was 5th in targets last year in Buffalo for a team that actually spread the ball around a little more than we thought. He had a 26.5% target share, 34.5% air yard share. The concern with Diggs is he wasn't as efficient. In the 2 previous seasons, 2019 and 2020, he was at 2.5 yards per route run in each. And those are elite metrics. Those are like approaching the top 5 on certain seasons. In 2021, he dropped to 1.84, which was 26th. That's a huge concern talent-wise. Now, Diggs is not the oldest player. The Bills were 2nd in neutral game pass rate. Josh Allen's there. They lost a lot of targets. They actually lost 193 targets. That's 31%, 184 coming from the wide receiver position. For me, this is just a volume game. With the pass-heavy nature of the Bills, the vacated targets, and then Diggs already being 5th in targets last year, man, like I don't see any way this guy doesn't finish with at least 150 targets. What do you think of Diggs?
Yeah, I think that the argument you made is pretty good. I have Stefon Diggs ranked as wide receiver number 6. So again, when we're inside the top 10, I don't think it's a super crazy fall off between these guys. Personally, I do have a tier break between the top 4 and then the rest of the guys that we are going to be discussing. That's also up to debate how you want to tier these guys. But at the end of the day, like you said, with Stefon Diggs, they lose Emmanuel Sanders. They lose Cole Beasley. I think Gabe Davis is going to step up big time in this offense. They bring in Jamison Crowder, who I think could almost be a little bit like Cole Beasley. I think Stefon Diggs' targets will increase. I think Stefon Diggs is a great player already, so there isn't really too much argument to make about why this guy is not going to perform. So I think that in 2022, as long as the Bills live up to their expectation, which is basically Super Bowl or bust at this point, Stefon Diggs could easily be the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy football. And I think that's a fine bet to make.
Yeah, I agree with you in terms of any of these top 5, top 6 guys could finish as the wide receiver 1 pretty easily. For me, when we're talking about safety in the top 5, top 6, I think Diggs offers almost as much as the top 3 guys just because of the offense he plays. And they're going to score a ton of points. They're going to throw the ball a ton, which we've seen in the previous years. And then he doesn't have the best target competition, Gabe Davis, Crowder. I think those are serviceable players, and I think they're solid additions for the offense as a whole. But ultimately, I don't see any of them ascending to the heights that Stefon Diggs has in his career. So he'll be my wide receiver 4, your wide receiver 6. That puts him at wide receiver 5 in the consensus. But I'm really curious to hear what you have to say about this next player, Deebo Samuel, who you ranked a little bit ahead of me. With Deebo at this time in the offseason, it's basically, does he stay with San Francisco? I think the bet now would be that he does. They didn't really seem to want to move on from him during the draft. And why would they? They have him under contract. But for me, it's, does he play that same role? He's voiced concerns about the running role he played last year. And I think there's a real chance that he just forces that out of whatever his play repertoire may be. He just tells Kyle Shanahan, look, I'll play for you, but I'm not taking these running back handoffs anymore. At least I'm only doing them situationally to preserve my career, which would be a little bit of an anomaly. We haven't really seen that, but I don't think it's too far-fetched. Deebo also wasn't targeted as much as a receiver last year, just 121 in targets. It was a 26% share. The offense is going to be extremely run-heavy. They were 27th in neutral pass rate last year. I think if they move to Trey Lance, that could even drop further. So there are concerns volume-wise with Deebo. There's concerns situationally as well. What do you make of him?
Yeah, so with Deebo Samuel, I think he is by far and away the guy that is ranked probably in every single person's top 10, the most confusing player to actually figure out what is going to happen, because the range of outcomes in my book for Deebo Samuel are very crazy. There's a situation where Deebo Samuel tries to tell that to Kyle Shanahan. Shanahan tells him to fuck off, and he runs the ball a million times with Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel's the
But
number
he could
one
just
receiver.
not do it. He could just be like, no, I'm not doing it.
Oh, maybe that is possible. I guess so. Yeah, it's not like Madden or something. He's not going to be able to force him to do it. But, I mean, there's a situation where Deebo Samuel, maybe he just pushes that to the side. He's running the ball 59 times like he did last year. And then maybe he becomes the number one receiver, right? He was wide receiver number 2 last year in half PPR, number 2 in half PPR points per game. And then there's the other outcome where, like you said, maybe they don't give him the ball as much. They don't rush the ball as much. Maybe instead of 59 rushes, it's 15 rushes. And then you're looking at a very different season where Deebo Samuel probably falls outside the top 12. So Deebo Samuel's a guy that I've ranked very highly, but my confidence in him is probably the lowest out of any wide receiver in the top 12. But the issue with that is I just feel so confident that if he is good, if he does get the ball, that he will dominate.
I think he will get the ball, and I think you can kind of bridge the gap if you're Kyle Shanahan. You don't have to use him on these carries out of the backfield.
Yeah.
Why can't you just use him as an extension of the run game, in the screen game, in the short pass game? And that way you at least appease Deebo, but is his usage really all that different? In my opinion, no. I think some of their offseason moves also point to Deebo playing more traditional wide receiver. They overdraft, I should say, Tyrion Davis-Price out of LSU, a day 3 prospect. They take him on day 2. They already have Elijah Mitchell, who they seem to like. They still have some backs on the roster, like a Jeff Wilson and Michael Hasty, who they've given the ball at times. I don't know. I think if you can bank on the targets being there for Deebo, he's fine to rank in this range. I personally have him a little lower at wide receiver 7, so we're splitting hairs here again. The concern for me is that he just doesn't get as many touches because he's limited in the run game. But again, we'll likely hear more about this in the offseason. And if you're drafting in the summer, you're going to have this answer, because we're going to have preseason reports, we're going to have practice reports, and we'll have people that tell you, okay, Deebo's not lining up in the backfield as much, or maybe he is. So we'll have this answer, but at this time in the year, more than comfortable taking a shot on the upside here with Deebo. Anything to add?
Yeah, something to add on those off-season reports. Those are some of the most crucial things on actually getting your fantasy draft correct, is listening to all of the reports, looking at all the beat reports. The only one that failed me last year was that Jamar Chase is terrible, apparently, and that the guy couldn't see a football unless it had the NCAA stripes on it. That was incorrect. I don't know what that guy was looking at.
Yeah, I mean, you got to just be able to sift through what is useful, what is not. A beat reporter telling you Jamar Chase has drops, I mean, that's a very correctable stat, and those of us playing fantasy know that drops are not sticky year to year. I hope that is the case with Marquise Brown. We'll see. But let's move to wide receiver 7. This is where things get really interesting. CeeDee Lamb, he's our consensus wide receiver 7. I think there's a chance CeeDee Lamb could finish in the top 6, where we have some of the other players, but there's just a little more projection with CeeDee Lamb. He's never played as the wide receiver 1 before. He has 2 seasons under his belt, and his yards per route run's been ascending. That's what we like to see for a young player. He went from 1.81 yards per route run to 1.94. That checks all the boxes for early he was a first round prospect, but anytime you're looking at really the first 3 rounds, you want them to ascend, you want them to get above that 1.7 level. CeeDee's done that in both years. And now they lose Amari Cooper. So their overall offense has 205 vacated targets, 101 vacated targets from the wide receiver position. That's 32% of the team's targets. CeeDee Lamb was already at 118 last year, but without Amari Cooper in the offense, I think there's a reasonable possibility that he's just up in the 150 target range, running more routes, because last year he was stuck with a limited route tree compared to Amari Cooper. And when he's on the field, this offense is electric. They were 6th in neutral pass rate. That is phenomenal. They were 2nd in plays per game, so their tempo is there too. CeeDee Lamb has a monster ceiling, and I could very easily see him in the top 5. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do think that the ceiling is monstrous for CeeDee Lamb. Last year, I had him ranked pretty highly as well. I had him ranked inside the top 12. This year, I have him ranked at my wide receiver number 8. We got him at 7, so not a huge difference between my ranking and the consensus, and where I assume you have him as well. CeeDee Lamb is one of the better wide receivers in the NFL in my book. The question is, will Dak Prescott show that consistency this season that was just not there last season? If that is the case, if Dak Prescott is more consistent, then you would assume that CeeDee Lamb would be more consistent. Without Amari Cooper, he is the clear number 1 guy on this team. They do have Michael Gallup as well, but CeeDee Lamb is the number 1 guy. His touchdown total last year was quite low. He only had 6 total touchdowns. It is pretty hard, in my opinion, to project touchdowns at the wide receiver position, but my assumption is that it does go up without Amari Cooper, and the targets go up as well. So, like you said, he could easily be a top 5 guy. It's just, can Dak really stay consistent, or is Dak going to be like last year? And if that's the case, then Lamb probably falls outside the top 10.
Yeah, I don't even know if I agree with that, just because the offset targets he's going to see. Like last year, Derek Carr wasn't a good quarterback. I mean, he's serviceable. Kirk Cousins, same thing. Like a lot of these players that have the crazy target volume don't need elite quarterback play. And I think Dak is personally better than Jefferson, better than Cousins, and better than like a Derek Carr.
I agree on that.
So I think there's a good ceiling. I like what the offense has done. They tried to kind of bolster the offensive line after it fell apart last year. They take Tyler Smith. You think what you want of him, but at least they're trying. The defense seems to me a little bit worse. They lost some production on the defensive line. People love to hype up Trevon Diggs, but the guy, for all the interceptions he has, he allows just as many touchdowns as 70-plus yards. So it's an offense, I think, that could benefit from some negative game script as well. I had CeeDee Lamb ranked ahead of Deebo Samuel because I think the targets, assuming health, are just a little more consistent than what Deebo will see. But anything else to add on that?
Yeah, last year, the one thing I did want to bring up was that the Dallas Cowboys had a 57.8% pass percentage. Do you think that is going to go up or down this season? Because I think that last year they kind of looked away from the rush at times, like when Zeke could have easily, if Zeke was healthy, I think they would have been running the ball a little bit more. So do you think that they will look to pass more, or how do you feel about that?
I think they'll probably look to run more. I mean, they're a team on the fringe. So 60% pass rate in neutral game scripts. That's with games within 1 score. That was 6th. Generally, outside of like the Buccaneers or the Bills, these teams that we have a larger sample size on, there is a little bit of regression towards the mean on both sides. We even saw it with Baltimore last year being as run heavy as they were. They regressed a little more pass heavy. So I think just unless their defense is horrible, they're probably going to run the ball a little more naturally. Thankfully for CeeDee Lamb, that's offset by a play rate, which is really high. Again, they were 2nd in tempo last year. And then just the vacated targets, there's so many of them. Not to mention Gallup's health is a concern. I know he'll be back, but at what point and at what capacity? The guy's coming off an ACL tear. Those, I think, have gotten much better, but there's still a little bit of volatility in recovery time. So I think it's conceivable that CeeDee Lamb has 150 targets or even upwards of like 170, 175 in a best case scenario.
Yeah, if he gets 160 around that range, then he's going to be top 5. So that's kind of the argument here, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, it could just come down to health. We have 7 receivers right now that are in this range. If one of them gets hurt, I think like CeeDee probably jumps up. But it very well could be CeeDee that gets hurt, and then he's behind some of these other guys. But, you know, that's just football. Guys get hurt. So we're not predicting injuries here, but conceivable that CeeDee is top 5 at the end of the year. More concerns probably than the players ahead of him due to the offense. Let's move to wide receiver 8. It's your boy, Tyreek Hill. And your boy, because he heads over from Kansas City to Miami, it's Tyreek Hill. Gets the big extension. And Tyreek Hill in Kansas City, he had solid target volume. He was 8th in targets, 156. I would have loved to see him approach those Davante Adams numbers, but we know Tyreek Hill was competing with Travis Kelce, so it never quite got there. But man, the guy's explosive. Last year, he was 12th in yards per route run. We've seen him higher than that at points in his career. The question for me is, what is the fit like in Miami? He moves to an offense under Mike McDaniel that had been run heavy when he was with San Francisco. They have Jalen Waddle, who we're going to talk about at some point this offseason. He had an electric rookie year. The offense is going to be amazing. My question is, are they too run heavy, and are there too many people in the offense? Does that limit Tyreek Hill at all?
Yeah, that is my biggest concern as well. Is there too many cooks in the kitchen here? And could that genuinely screw Tyreek Hill out? Now, my best guess is that now there's been a lot of talk, oh, they're going to put Tyreek Hill in the Deebo Samuel role. Deebo Samuel is a different player than Tyreek Hill. But I do believe that when you trade away the capital, you give the guy, he's the highest paid receiver in the NFL, you're going to get him the ball. You just have to get him the ball. And that may hurt Jalen Waddle. That may make Jalen Waddle not be a top 12 wide receiver. But I think that if you rank Tyreek Hill outside the top 10, I think that's a little bit crazy. I really do believe in Miami that he's going to be able to get the ball. Sure, Tua doesn't have the same arm that Pat Mahomes does, but it's not like every single catch Tyreek Hill had last season was 50 yards down the field from a bomb from Patrick Mahomes. There's 7 yards like slants that the guy takes to the house. You saw it in the playoffs up against the Buffalo Bills. He literally takes a slant and takes that thing 70 yards into the end zone. He can do that. They're going to design plays to get him the ball. Maybe his target total does drop down, but as long as the team is feeding him the ball, I just have confidence that the guy is just so talented that he's going to get it done. And I just think that he's good enough to get it done here in Miami.
You and I are in lockstep here. I think this is a talent win-out situation, and I love Waddle. He had an amazing year. Again, we'll talk about him at some point this offseason, but Tyreek Hill, he's played at a top 5 level for so long.
Yes.
And the guy's not old yet. I mean, he's not 30. It's not like he's reaching that Davante Adams range where you start to get concerned. He's still very much in the prime of his career. Miami quietly has 172 vacated targets from the wide receiver position. So if Tyreek Hill comes in and takes 150 of those, that shouldn't honestly ding Waddle too much. I think at some point the guys could cannibalize each other, but could we see a T. Higgins, Jamar Chase type situation where they both finish with solid fantasy scores? I think that's well in the range of possibilities here. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. I initially had them both ranked in the top 12. I kind of did knock Waddle down a little bit, but I still think, no, it wouldn't surprise me. And when I have Waddle ranked at, spoiler, wide receiver number 14. So that's really not that far away from top 12. So I think that as long as Tua Tagovailoa does take that next step, and I really hope the offensive line is better this season. We paid a lot of money to get these guys here. So I hope that that really helps Tua as well.
Yeah, I agree with you ultimately. I think Tua will play better this year. And I like what your Dolphins have done across the board. They spent a lot of money, and I hope Liko Meikenberg can take a step forward here. But let's move to wide receiver number 9 in the consensus. It's Mike Evans. And this might seem a little high for Mike Evans compared to where he's been ranked historically. But I mean, at what point do we just have to say this guy produces year in, year out, no matter what? This guy's had 1,000 yards receiving in every single NFL season. Every single NFL season. That is historic, not to mention the offense he's playing in with Tom Brady. They are first in neutral pass rate. They are first in pass rate overall. They're third in plays per game. Mike Evans had a 27% air yard share, so he's being used downfield a little bit more. He's a red zone weapon. I mean, Chris Godwin's coming off the injury, and he's going to at least push Evans for targets when healthy. But, man, it is super hard for me not to rank Evans as a top 10 receiver at this point in his career.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I have been someone that for some reason just always thinks, "Oh man, he scores like 10 touchdowns every year. That's got to go down, right? Eventually, he's not going to." And he just does every year. He scored 14 total touchdowns last year, number 2 wide receiver. You just have to be confident with what he has done in Tampa Bay. He was putting up numbers with Jameis Winston. He's going to put up great numbers yet again with Tom Brady. Like you said, the Godwin injury. I'm not overly concerned about that, but that does definitely help out Mike Evans if he's not getting as much work early on. The Gronk situation, that is something that is probably like a coin flip if Gronk will return. Maybe he comes back. Maybe he goes to fucking Cincinnati or Tennessee, like they're talking about. Who really knows at this point? But I do think that Mike Evans is the clear number 1 guy on this team. And Mike Evans probably catches the final touchdown again from Tom Brady before he goes to Fox. He's going to launch it into the crowd again.
Yeah, looking at your rankings versus mine, you have him at wide receiver 9. I have him at wide receiver 8. So we're pretty much in lockstep here. The offense is awesome. The QB is awesome. And Evans has the volume. Whether Godwin plays or not, he's going to be in that 130 target range. We've seen it already in multiple seasons with Godwin in the offense. So love Mike Evans this year. Love the red zone ability. Let's move to wide receiver 10 in the consensus. It's A.J. Brown. A lot to talk about with A.J. Brown moving teams. I think the biggest concern that I hear people talk about is the fit. The Eagles are very run heavy. Last year, they were 31st in neutral pass rate. Jalen Hurts hasn't necessarily been the quarterback of the future for this team. They're giving him full run this year, and they're really looking to see what he has with this A.J. Brown trade. But my rebuttal is that he wasn't in the pass heaviest offense to begin with, and he was producing. Tennessee's not the pass heaviest offense. This guy was 4th in yards per route run. He is elite downfield ability. And when he's not healthy, I personally believe he's a top 5 talent at the wide receiver position in the NFL. Do you view this in a similar light, or do you think there are legit concerns with A.J. Brown?
Yeah, I agree completely with what you said. I think the argument about how run heavy a team is pretty stupid. When he was on the Titans, one of the most, like, if Derrick Henry was healthy, they probably would have been the most run heavy team in the NFL. AJ Brown, to me, actually got a boost in my rankings. I was a little bit unsure about AJ Brown going into this season because I really thought in Tennessee that things might just be bad because Ryan Tannehill didn't look great last year. Maybe he has regressed. Maybe the fact that they're giving Derrick Henry the ball so much that could really impact AJ Brown. But I think here in Philadelphia, they really gave me a lot of confidence because they traded the pick for him. They slot him in as the number 1 receiver. Davante Smith is there, but besides Davante Smith, there's not too much competition there. I think if AJ Brown is able to stay healthy, he could easily surpass this top 10 ranking. Even with him only playing in 13 games last year, he was getting 8.1 targets per game. I could see that as something that could easily happen here in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I personally believe that's probably his floor. And don't get me wrong, love Devontae Smith, even love players like Dallas Goedert. I think there's a lot of upside with the offense overall, but it's similar to Tyreek Hill, where maybe the volume's not elite, but we know A.J. Brown's going to receive it. The contract reflects that. The talent reflects that. And he's done it in similar offenses. Anything to add?
Yeah, a lot of the time people look so deep into the situation when in reality you need to also analyze the fact that AJ Brown is so good, Tyreek Hill is so good that maybe if the situation isn't the greatest, they will still be able to overcome that due to their talent.
I agree with you 100%. Wide receiver 11 in the consensus rankings, Keenan Allen of the Los Angeles Chargers. Keenan Allen, the story is this guy's a vet. He's getting up there in age. Last year, he was 7th in overall targets at 25% target share, 28% air yard share. He's primarily a slot receiver, so he's never really going to get the Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase targets. But what he does receive is very consistent targets underneath. I think at this point in his career, you're only really concerned with a talent drop-off. Last year, he was 30th in yards per route run, so not quite the rate he'd been at previously. But this Chargers team is an elite offense, and Keenan Allen is positioned as the wide receiver 1. They were 4th in neutral pass rate. They were 5th in overall pass rate, 5th in plays per game. So very pass heavy, very up-tempo. And they have an ascending quarterback on an offense, which has done nothing but add pieces along the offensive line. Love Herbert, and I love the connection with Keenan Allen. I'm not worried about the age. Are you?
Yeah, age. Now it seems like these guys can just keep playing until they're older and they keep playing at such a high rate that it almost seems stupid to try to predict a fall off at this point for Keenan Allen. He was top 8 in targets, number 6 at receptions, number 12 in receiving yards. He was number 20 in touchdowns, but again, the touchdown number is not something that I'm going to be super keen on trying to project. Again, I think Mike Evans will score more than 10, and I think that Julio Jones will probably score 1 if he's on a team. Julio Jones never scores touchdowns. But Keenan Allen is going to be one of those wide receivers that continues to fall down draft boards despite putting up really good numbers over the last 5 years at this point. He was wide receiver 14 last year in half PPR, 14 half PPR points per game. I think that this team's going to get better, and they do play in this division like I talked about in yesterday's quarterback video. This is a division where there is going to be a lot of shootouts. There are going to be a lot of high-scoring games, and in those games, Keenan Allen could be a huge benefactor of that. I think he sees around 160 targets like he did last year, and I wouldn't even be surprised if he was closer to 170. So I think Keenan Allen's going to have yet another fantastic season, and I have him ranked at wide receiver number 11, and that even feels a little low in my heart.
I agree. I mean, they didn't add anybody. They
Yeah.
they had like a little bit at the tight end position, but nothing at receiver. They're trotting out the same unit. So I don't think Mike Williams takes a step ahead of Allen. I love Mike Williams. He'll be somebody we also talk about later, but I also do not see him taking over Allen's role. I think he's comfortably in the top 12. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I'm definitely going to be very confident drafting Keenan Allen. When I press the button in my draft, I'll be very excited about it.
All right, let's round this out with number 12, T. Higgins, the second receiver for the Cincinnati Bengals, the only team that we see twice in the top 12. You already mentioned it with T. Higgins. There's a very real chance that he's the player that could take a step forward in this offense. A lot of people are just shooing in Jamar Chase, but Higgins has been fantastic as well. Last year, Higgins only had 110 targets, but when we look at target share numbers, he was actually ahead of Jamar Chase. He had a 24% target share, 35% air yard share, so plenty downfield targets as well. He was 11th in yards per route run. The Cincinnati Bengals had 2 receivers in the top 12 of yards per route run. We already talked about the offense as a whole, and we found out after the season that T. Higgins was playing banged up. He did all this playing through an injury the entire season. Just mind-blowing to me. The only concern I have, can Cincinnati sustain 2 top 12 receivers?
Yeah, that was my biggest concern as well, and that's why I don't have him ranked inside the top 12. I got him at 15, so not a huge difference at the end of the day, but he would not be a top 12 guy in my book. Last year, he was top 12 in points per game. He was tied with Mike Williams as the wide receiver number 12, and he was the wide receiver number 22 overall in half PPR. He did only play in 14 games, so realistically, if he does play in 17 games, he probably is a top 12 wide receiver. I think this year, like you said, the biggest concern is, can this offense be as efficient? Is Joe Burrow going to have those monster games like we saw at the end of the season where this guy looked like the best quarterback in the NFL? Is the offensive line actually better? Who knows? Who knows, right? That's always a gamble. But I think that at the end of the day, it's hard to get worse at the offensive line for the Cincinnati Bengals. I could have went out there and I might have been able to do a better job. Probably not. I would get absolutely mauled by a guy like Aaron Donald. Stand absolutely no chance. But at the end of the day, I think that T. Higgins is a very talented player. Don't be surprised if he outscores Jamar Chase. I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I think you also have some built-in sort of upside where if one of these guys gets hurt, I think the other one automatically becomes like top 3 in the NFL in targets.
Definitely, 100%. If Jamar Chase was to go down, obviously not rooting for injuries, then T. Higgins is going to just be amazing. And then if both of them got hurt, then Tyler Boyd's going to have this crazy season.
Man,
and
I hope that doesn't happen.
If one of them gets hurt, Tyler Boyd is also a sneaky guy that every single week you got to rank him inside the top 24.
Yeah, I agree 100%. But that'll do it for us for the top 12. Anything to add on this group as a whole?
No, this was a very interesting top 12. Let us know down below in the comment section where you guys differ from us, because the quarterback video, while there are some other guys, maybe there's 2-3 other guys you would rank inside the top 12, there's probably like 10 receivers that people name. Oh, why didn't you have this guy in here? Like, where's Jerry Jeudy? He should be in the top 12. People say things like that, so that's why I always think it's pretty fun.
Well, lucky for you guys, you viewers, we are doing the second part of our top 24 video, receivers 13 through 24 tomorrow. And I looked at your ranks. I'm sure you looked at mine. I think there's going to be some heated debate on a couple of these prospects. So make sure to check that out. Check out the quarterback top 12 we did yesterday. But that'll do it for us. The top 10 is on your screen. T. Higgins came in at 12, Keenan Allen 11, A.J. Brown 10, Mike Evans 9, Tyreek Hill 8, CeeDee Lamb 7, Deebo Samuel 6, Stefon Diggs 5, Davante Adams 4, Jamar Chase 3, Justin Jefferson 2, Cooper Kupp came in at number 1. Of course, you can follow Nick on Twitter at Notorious Fantasy. I am Matt Gajewski. You can follow me on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. That'll do it for us. I want to thank you guys for viewing before we head out. But again, make sure to check out the channel throughout the week. We'll have positional rankings for all of the main fantasy positions. We will see you guys again next time, and have a good day.